Hello everyone, and today we are going to dive into war history. Imperial War Museum in London, free to visit. And while I know a lot about World War II, I don't know anything about World War I. And that's a very important part of British history. So I hope to learn a little bit more about World War I. But before we do that, let's quickly explore the grounds and then dive inside because it starts to rain a little bit. So it looks that over there we just have a piece of the Berlin Wall as well. So we have the Tibetan Peace Garden with the Kalachakra Mandala in the middle, which His Holiness the Dalai Lama considers to be a vehicle for world peace. Well, I think that's enough for the outside part. Let's dive inside into the museum. But the entrance hall, when you enter, the first thing you notice are the planes hanging above the ceiling and some of the vehicles, but it also has 50 bombs decorated on the floor and over the stairs, just to show the big impact war basically has on people and how destructive it can be.
War is edging closer to Britain. Britain has no obligation to fight. Its leaders agonize whether to join in. They fear a victorious and hostile Germany would dominate Europe, threatening Britain's national security and vital trade. The world's balance of power is at stake. When Germany invades neutral Belgium to get to France, the argument for Britain joining the war becomes stronger. Britain has long promised to protect Belgium's neutrality.
So apparently, while there was a lot of tension till 1914 in Europe, there was not immediately a reason to start a war. But yeah, Germany invaded Belgium, which was a neutral territory at that time. So that triggered a war for Britain to start a war. And well, we talk about the great empire, and well, they find it great in a way. Only 70% of the wealth was only controlled by 1% of the people. So people immigrated to new places around the world, hopeful in a way, but there was also increasing pessimist about this great empire and how this would develop. One of the reasons the war got so many casualties is this was the first war that was used by modern weapons. And while the generals understood the power, it was the first time fighting them and they didn't really have any tactics. Meaning, before the reason was as long as you run fast enough and hit hard enough, you would win the war. But apparently that strategy didn't really work with modern weapons. And the issue is, well, this started originally as a European war. It automatically meant world war with all those colonies around the world. So the war impacted everyone around the world, unfortunately. And while I thought and knew this First World War, this was the first time gas was used as a weapon. I thought it was also very lethal, but apparently only 3% of the people were killed by using gas. But of course it had huge side effects on the people fighting in the fronts. Just again now explains how useless war is. I think the Battle of the Somme is probably the most... Well, that's a loud military. That's the sound when a Spitfire flies over, I guess. But what I wanted to say is that war is useless. The Battle of the Somme probably contained over 1.1 million people who died just in that little area in France. Between like the Germans, we lost around 600,000 people, and the Allied 500,000 people. It's just a bloody mess and useless. So this confined space I'm going to enter is a trench which should just give us the feeling how it would have been to take goods to and from the front line. And you'll see tanks going over, which would happen there, like in this small space. We take the goods, Spitfires flying over, and we heard the sound earlier already of that as well. And this is just a way of how to transport it in the time, and should be really chaotic in that narrow space. After what we learned in the end, Russia got out of the war because they got hunger and civil war going on in their own country, so they couldn't afford to fight any longer. In 1919, the peace treaty of Versailles was signed. But did we really get peace after all after that? Probably not really, because Germany got poorer. They had to borrow money from the US to start up the industry again. Hunger raised in that country. Extremists got more power, and well, people lost faith in democracy, and we all know what happened after in the 1940s.
It also hit home that there was nothing you could really do to control that. There were certain things, but there is that element of chance that you could just get hit.
If you look at any newsreel of any Afghan national, very similar to what you would see on telly. Beards, the dish dashes, some of them had brown waistcoat, style woolen waistcoats on, some of them had turbans on, some of them had the Afghan style hats. If you were to walk past them down the street in middle of Sangin, you wouldn't think they were anything, but it's the only reason we knew they were enemy is because they were carrying weapons.
So then the second floor shows important artifacts from the Second World War, and while it's devastating to see again all those machines, it's also kind of fascinating what human engineering can achieve, because those machines are kind of incredible that we as a human can create that. Devastating, but incredible. And then one floor up, that's where we are now, that's the period after 1945, showing parts of the Cold War, but also things afterwards, such as this United Nations vehicle.
High intensity flying during the past 6 months has not only meant peak avoiding operations like this, but also periodical visits to Saturday to replace the 600 tons of bombs and rockets and over 500,000 rounds of cannon ammunition expended by the aircraft.
They didn't came here for joy or something like that. They came because they need to come.
Do something for my country. European leaders should talk with the people who are responsible for destroying my country, Afghanistan. They should talk to them. Why? Because it's not stopped there, and if the war continues in Afghanistan, I'm sure people will break out of the borders and leave to save their lives.
Alright, so that was a very interesting 2 hours of my life where we spent time into the Imperial War History Museum. And last time we spoke to each other, I went up, there was an interactive exhibition about refugees and stuff. I got rejected on my asylum.
More sadness, please. More sadness, please. Maybe you don't quite have it. Unfortunately, your application has not been successful on this occasion. Showing a mixture of too much and not enough emotion is a sign of inconsistency. It's very difficult to trust anything you say.
But it gives you a good look into the stories of all those refugees, and then if you go completely to the top, there's a Holocaust Monument that you can enter, and that tells all the history about the Holocaust and the Second World War. And what I didn't realize is how fast Hitler got his total dictatorial power. Basically, when he was elected in January with a small minority, he in 6 months' time he transformed that completely into a dictatorial regime, which is pretty fast as well. But if you're ever in the area, and well, it's free to visit anyway, and you are into that war history, I would definitely recommend you to visit the Imperial War Museum.